since, every great movie begins with the story, I think we should start with Sam. This is based on your 2012 play. What was sort of the initial spark or the idea that prompted you to write this story?
I first started writing this 12, 13 years ago, and like Charlie, I was teaching expository writing at the time to college freshmen at Rutgers. Both my husband and I were. Like Charlie, I was really struggling to connect with my students, and at a certain point, I just kind of begged them, like Charlie does, to write something honest. And one of my students wrote a line that ended up in the play and the film, which was, "I think I need to accept that my life isn't going to be very exciting," which was this kind of like bracing moment of honesty. And so I started writing a play about an expository writing teacher. It was the first time that I kind of got out of my own way as a writer and was like, I think I need to just access some more personal stuff here. So, I grew up in the town where Charlie grew up. I was a gay kid there. I went to a Christian school that was similar to where Ty's character comes from, and I was gay, and I was eventually outed and had to leave. And, that and a lot of other things resulted in years of depression and self-medication with food. So, even though nothing in the movie is autobiographical, it comes from that kind of personal place.
So Darren Aronofsky sees your play. You don't even know he's seen your play.
No idea.
And he reaches out to you at some point about making a movie.
Yeah, literally, it was just Darren Aronofsky wants to meet with you and talk about film rights to the whale.
And similar to Sam, Brendan, you get a call saying Darren Aronofsky wants to meet with you for a role. Had you ever even met or spoken to him? Was this just out of the blue?
I didn't know Darren. I met him after the word went out that Mary Vernew said that Darren was going to shoot a film, and I only knew as much as that it was about a man who had been living by himself for a considerable amount of time, and he had been having certain regrets about life choices he'd made, choices that life made for him. Also, he'd been harming himself by overeating, and he realizes that he has very little time and is compelled to try and redeem himself in his daughter's eyes, from whom he was estranged. And that's all I knew. I met Darren in his offices at Protozoa one very cold January in 2020. He was a gentleman, and he explained that this movie was something he didn't know if he could make it, just by the fact that he had a challenge ahead of him to cast the role. What he did say is, read this. I hadn't read the screenplay, and I went home, I fell to pieces, I knew this was something compelling and truthful, and it spoke to me in ways that I hadn't seen on any script that it came across my purview ever in my career. So that made my teeth kind of sweat a little bit because I wanted to do it very much. Darren had arranged for a reading at, is it St. Mark's?
Theater 80, St. Mark's.
Thank you, in the village, with music stands and some other actors to fill out the cast. Sadie Sink was also at the reading where she and I met. She had no idea who I was, which is really good. So we came to it with fresh eyes. And I knew that I'd be lucky enough to be working with her if this came together. But then it was March 2020, so yeah.
So what happened?
Well, we all put our sweatpants on for a while is what happened. We had to, I guess we didn't have an answer. We didn't know if we had a movie. And that was the answer, and it stayed that way for some time.
So much has been made of the amazing makeup and prosthetics in this movie, and for good cause. It really enhances this performance. Adrien, you've worked with Darren before. At what point did he approach you about this project? And let's be honest, what was your initial reaction? Did you know you could do it?
Well, the thing with Darren is that I've worked with him a few times. Like, I think this is my 5th project I do with him. And he's relentless. He's a relentless perfectionist. And he called me, I think it was in the late fall of 2020, and says, I have this project. We want to shoot this really quickly. We want to shoot this in about 5 weeks. I mean, I was okay, well, we're going to have to use a lot of tricks to sort of hide Charlie's body, and maybe if we do like just the facial prosthetics, maybe seeing his hands, we could do something that we could fit within that 5 weeks. And then I had like a few days later, I had another call with Darren, and I was like, so what do you want to see? We could hide him like that. We could hide his body. He's like, no, I want to see the full thing. And there's actually going to be a scene where he's going to be in the shower nude. And I was like, 5 weeks? No. And then we went back and forth, and I begged them. I said, like, this is the first time I ever do a movie, not with that kind of makeup, but where the main character is in prosthetics the entire time. He's in almost every scene. If the makeup doesn't work, the movie is not going to work. So I was like, you don't give me 5 weeks, please. And then we agreed on that, and he was super kind, him and everybody at A24 at Protozoa. And they ended up giving me 12 weeks to build the makeup.
That's still not a lot.
It's not a lot, but it's better than 5 years.
Okay. True. And what was sort of the process of perfecting it for you and for Brendan? Because I know in under normal conditions you'd be working together and you'd be making molds, but this was COVID times. You weren't able to do it. Did you even meet until you got to the set?
No, that's the crazy thing, is that we've been very lucky because we live in this day and age, and we've used a lot of 3D printing technology and scanning in the past 5-6 years at the shop. I've sent our producer Jeremy to meet with Brendan in his driveway with a 3D scanner.
It was an iPad. Come on. I kept screwing up the scan because my dog was running around my ankles. Sorry.
And then the following day, he sent me data that was pretty rough, but based with all the pictures that he had taken.
Did you just say it was pretty rough?
Yeah, there was a tail of a dog like at the bottom. And
we spent a lot of time together. Adrien.
And so I cleaned up all that data, and when we had something that was workable, and we did all of the initial designs with that until we found the character of Charlie in 3D as 3D models. And then once we had that, and Darren was happy with it, then we were able to refine all the models that we had until we got something that was photoreal, and we were able to 3D print from that and create a prosthetic from those prints.
Wow. And in the meantime, Brendan, you're preparing for this role, you don't have the prosthetics yet, but you're talking to people, you're doing research. Can you talk about that initial research, and then when you did put the prosthetics on, if it changed everything?
I needed to approach the text as it would do as if I was working on one of Sam's plays, and I needed to get it in my head. I felt like I had to have the lines ready for me, because it would be too complicated on the day. And so I spent a lot of time really in study in my little office space above the garage, on Zoom calls, drilling lines, and making the acquaintance of some really wonderful people who are with the Obesity Action Coalition, who I was introduced to by Dr. Rachel Goldman, who advocates on their behalf. It's a support group and gives referrals to those who live with obesity and their family members. One thing that I learned above all else was don't be mean. Don't be mean, be kind, because something that they each had in common with one another was that early on in their lives, they were spoken to by an adult or a parent. They were really quite cruel to the child about how they presented themselves, how they appeared, how their body appeared. And I know that it stayed in a cycle that brought them to the place where they are now. And it just undermined the need I had to be a voice of dignity and respect in playing this role. as we see with a man like Charlie, who carries the trauma that he has consumed on his body as a character. And it was very clear to me that those who live with it have a story to tell, and they deserve to have it done so with dignity and with respect.
Mm-hmm. Rob, I'm so curious. I believe this is your first collaboration with Darren. How did he approach you, and what was sort of your initial response? Did you discuss influences? What was that conversation like?
Darren's one of my favorite filmmakers, and so this was very exciting. And then at about 11 a.m. that morning, we were Zooming, and Darren told me about the film. I think he was pretty far along with the edit at that point. And so he told me what he had, and he said, I want to send it to you. And I watched it, and there was no score. You know, Philip Glass talks about how composing is actually about listening. And I really relate to that. So I'm always trying to listen to what is trying to be said and spoken, and if that is a feel or a tone or an instrument. And a couple things that came through were this overtone flute, which I had heard years before. This Belgian guy makes these overtone flutes, and they kind of sound like a didgeridoo, and a flute had a baby. And it's this very unearthly sound. It opens the film in the shot where the boy gets off on the bus. It's kind of this hollow, windy sound. And also I felt that there's a kind of, Charlie's character Charlie is so erudite, and he's an intellectual in a lot of ways, and he's very well read. And the thread of Moby Dick, there's something mythological and allegorical and kind of classical about it. And I thought, you know, that's really the soul of his mind in a way. So to give some breadth and depth and bring some more classical elements and kind of a mythological approach to the score, it's kind of making it larger than life at times. That's what I went for, and the process with Darren was really not a lot of conversing about ideas. It was kind of like, just show me. It was really not prescriptive in terms of what he wanted, and he really looked to me to kind of imagine that. So we went on step by step and let some things live in the film, and there were other scenes that were kind of tough to crack, but a lot of the initial ideas that I put forth ended up being what's in the final.
Before we go, I just want to ask Sam and Brendan, and we have an extra mic in case you need it. Sam, you've been living with the story for, you know, more than 10 years, and Brendan, you've been living with this character who I know is, you know, incredibly personal to you. Now that the world is finally seeing it, you know, what do you sort of hope that people take away from this movie and from Charlie?
I mean, I think we live in deeply cynical times. And we might be even getting more cynical. I think we live in an era where, like, cynicism masquerades as intelligence, it masquerades as sophistication, but actually it's pretty intellectually bankrupt, in my opinion. It's easy, it's perversely comforting, and I think, you know, this is a story and a play and a movie that wears its heart firmly on its sleeve. It's vulnerable in that way, but I hope that people would get a sense of not easy optimism, but like hard-won hope in dark times.
My hope is that we can change some hearts and minds by story's end. I know I needed to gather myself the first time I saw it. There was no score, I should tell you, Rob, when I saw it. And I was also, I felt like I was watching a movie I didn't know I was in, but I was, I had a feeling that this could do a lot of good. So I felt quite confident about that. I felt good about that.
Well, again, it's in theaters now. Please let everyone know. Thank you for being a great audience. Thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks.